Thank you for turning to page 121. Today we're going to take a look at double adventure number 5, the Chamax Plague, followed by Horde. I recently took a look at the referee's guide number 6, which was the Garden Worlds one, and the Chamax were called out at the end of that as something that can basically ruin a garden world. And I thought, oh, well, I haven't actually looked at the Chamax Plague in a long time. So because of that, I reread the adventure and found out how much I still love this thing. We played the Chamax Horde back in the early 80s. It was one of my earlier Traveler games. I didn't run it. My GM at the time did. I never played Horde, but we're going to take a look at both adventures because they're tied together in this very well written Keith Brothers presentation. So today on page 121, double adventure number 5, the Chamax Plague and Horde. The Chamax Plague, double adventure number 5, from Game Designer's Workshop for Traveler. This guy was published in 1981, and it was an offering from J. Andrew Keith and William H. Keith Jr. Those guys always wrote a good book. I've talked about the Keith brothers many times before. Famous people hailing from Oak Lawn, Illinois, where my wife was raised. So just a few miles from my house. I always thought it was neat that these guys were right there in my backyard. I did play this adventure back in 81 to early 82. I think it was late 81. I was only in Traveler a few months at that time, and I had not GM'd it yet. But under the GM that I had, I played my Barbarian with the Gauss rifle, Rat Crusher. I only played a few missions with him, but this was one of them. He actually did pretty well in this. We had, I think, 7 or 8 of us as players going into this, and we lost about 3. It was pretty brutal. The Chamax Plague is designed around what, for all purposes, becomes an infestation of a creature that actually is indigenous to the planet Chamax. And I took a look at the creature itself in the Mongoose 2nd edition in the Garden Worlds video I released a week or so ago. So if you want to take a look at that, that'll give you some information on this as well. So basically the adventure takes place in 1107, and the characters are given out here. I love that about old Traveler adventures. You could just plug and play the characters like the old D&D ones. And you get a set amount of ship's locker equipment and then available equipment table for you to buy. You are hired to go see what the heck happened to a ship. Well, first off, you are involved with a rescue. You are aboard the ship Mud Shark, which is just a merchant ship, and the Mud Shark comes along and finds a signal GK coming from a single ship that is coming in off the planet Chamax, moving at high speed but not under power. Course predictions show that it will pass several million kilometers from Elenzar, which is a colony that you're at, and will fall into the sun. No communications have been received from the ship. So the Mud Shark is asked to intercept the ship since they're the only ones that can possibly get there. It takes you 2 days are required to match course and velocity with the other ship. You're not getting any life signs off of her. You're not getting any communication or course corrections from her. The other ship is a 40-ton pinnace, the in-star spec logo painted on the prow. The ship has several burn marks on the outside and is just kind of tumbling toward the sun. You're not able to go lock to lock with this thing, so you cannot dock with it, but you're able to cross. Both your ships are just able to match, and you're able to cross. And you do find a survivor. He's hiding behind a control panel in a tiny little space, and he is screaming, "No, no," and then loses consciousness. What we find out is that this gentleman dealt with the Chamax. Now, by the way, I say Chamax. It could also be Chamax. The reason I say Chamax is that's how it was pronounced when my GM ran this. So it's how it was introduced to me. And honestly, that's the way I'm going to keep it. So if you say Chamax, more power to you. So when the players get back to Elenzar, the branch manager of the station for Instar Spec calls them in and says, "Hey, we need somebody to go check out another merchantman, the Sharin Challenger, with 15 people on board, 8 scientists and 7 crew. We've lost contact with them. Something's going on with the planet. The pinnace was part of that ship, and we don't know what the heck is going on. Can you go down and take a look? To that end, we will send 3 people with you. Dr. Kel Warren, who's a scientist, Lotan Delardi, who is concerned because his girlfriend's down there, his fiance more properly, and Cal Yotisk, and he is an example of a classic, very useful character known as the Spear Carrier or Extra. Referees encouraged to use Yotisk as the first victim to show the characters what they're facing. What we call, Star Trek fans call a red shirt. So it's kind of neat that this guy was called out as a red shirt right there on page 11. So Chamax, the planet itself, is almost a garden world, except most of the vegetation is gone. The atmosphere is fine, but all the surface life has pretty much been stripped from it hundreds of years ago, and nobody knows why. Recently, there has been signs of an older civilization that was thriving on the planet, and that's what the Sharan Challenger went down to check, is to find out what the civilization was and just get more information on it. Well, what they have found is an infestation of the Chamax. The Chamax, named for the planet that they're on, are basically hibernating insect bug type creatures. I'll show a picture of two of them in a moment. They are roughly the size of Great Danes, and they are an aggressive predator species that exists on this planet. The predator species actually overcame the society that had been on the planet that built this civilization and killed most of them and ran some of them off. And that is actually dealt with more in the second adventure of this, Horde. They are vaguely spider-like in appearance, like tarantulas the size of Great Danes. 2 distinct types, hunters and maternals. And again, my video on the garden stuff went over this pretty thoroughly, but I'm also going to go over it again here. They're not intelligent, but they have an empathic sense that draws hunters toward living creatures, in some way links the maternal, the broodmare, brood bug, with the rest of them, and they are able to sense radio broadcasts, and they're strongly attached to. They strongly react to radio sources. Makes them the bane of any kind of higher tech planet. So these animals are really tough to kill. You have to deal 12 points of damage to them to affect them at all. If you do 11, it simply does not affect them. They've got this spongy outer coating that absorbs the damage. So it's an all or nothing situation. If you get the 12 in, and it's got to be in one shot, if you get the 12 in, you rupture their acid sac, which is one of their main forms of attack, and dissolving food to bring back to the queen. If you rupture that sac, then they are dissolved in their own acid, but they can also explode on you. So this sounds an awful lot like Alien. The movie Alien was 2 years old when this was out. Aliens had not been out yet. So this kind of, it looks to me like the Keith brothers took the Alien idea and extrapolated a little bit and went on to 5 years before the release of Aliens to go ahead and plot that movie out. That's what this feels like. These are just monsters that live to eat, destroy, eat, and then feed their queen. And the queen can turn out a tremendous amount of these things per day. So once they are up and active, and with an active food supply, they are very hard to stop. The trick with these things is once they have exhausted their food supply, most will die off, but enough will hibernate, and they can do this for hundreds of years, waiting for more food to come by. The team that came down on the first ship was viewed as food and activated one of the sleeping clutches, and this, of course, led to the problems they had on the ship. Their ship is heavily damaged, showing signs of acid, having eaten through the hull. It's not really space-worthy any longer without patching. And about half the ship's company is missing. So your challenge now is you have to deal with these things that are awake and active around the ship. But once you've done that, you have to find out where the crew went. So we get a lot of information on the Chamax. I really like this monster. I thought this was very well done. And I use the word monster there because, let's face it, Alien is really a monster movie. Alien was released in 1979 during a very high time for slasher flicks at the theater. And Alien was originally viewed as just truckers in space dealing with a serial killer. some kind of psycho killer. That was the idea behind the film, and it's evolved, of course, much beyond that, but that was the original. So then we go to Sharon Challenger itself. We have the nice deck plan for it. It's up to the GM to decide where the damage is. It's called out in the text, but you have to decide specifically where it is and how it can be patched. And there is the Maternal, the Queen, and there is the Hunter. So these things are nasty. And like I said, the very much akin to Alien, the xenomorph in Alien. And that's one of the things I liked about this. And I remember thinking when we saw this, because I had actually seen Alien a few years earlier at the theater with the guy who GM'd this. So he and I spent a lot of time talking about how these two, that this reminded us of Alien. Now, you find the rest of the crew. They've fled a couple 100 miles away in the ship's gig. They are safe, but they have awakened another clutch. The whole planet is infested with these things. They are just kind of staying silent. You're able to find them and get them off, and that's the end of the adventure. So it's a fun adventure with a lot of combat. Rat Crusher did quite well because he had a Gauss rifle, which was pretty much one of, if not the most powerful weapon we had. We had another guy walking around with a laser rifle. That helped a lot. So he and I were kind of point. We were what now would be called the tanks. And while we certainly took damage, we were the ones that kind of spearheaded things. And we did lose 2 or 3 crew members. Now we come to Horde. Horde takes place on an entirely different planet, possibly with a different group of player characters. That's really up to your group. You can continue with the same players who happen to be on the new planet when a Chamax ship lands and disgorges the Chamax creatures, the xenomorphs, who start attacking and causing all kinds of mayhem. The situations, as they call them, the adventure is broken down into 8 different parts. And then we get the computer records in the alien spaceship. So basically what this is you are on the planet Rashiv, and it's in Raiden. And keep in mind, this is before a lot of the universe for Traveler had been really developed. It's just outside the Darien subsector of the Spinward Marches, and it's 1 parsec from Chamax. And basically what's happened is a sublight ship that escaped Chamax a few hundred years earlier has crashed on this planet, or actually made a controlled descent on this planet, and disgorged not the surviving friendly race, but the Chamax, who had gotten into the ship and killed everybody aboard and continued to breed and then went into hibernation until the ship landed. So now this planet is infected. And you are aboard the Mud Shark, if you're continuing from the last one, and your ship has some repairs that need to be made. Specifically, you have to wait for a part, and you're waiting for a supply ship to come in, and you're going to be the better part of 2 to 3 weeks before the supply ship is actually due, and that's when all this stuff happens. So the local government says, hey, you have a bunch of laser guns as part of your cargo that you're going to sell. We'll buy them, you train us up in them, and we have to go fight this horde that's headed our way. And it goes into a nice detail. We get the Joran Peninsula, which the only reason a lot of these folks survive is because there's a narrow opening, a land bridge that connects the peninsula from the main continent. So you're able to kind of hole up there. And this does a lot of nice stuff. It talks about the outbreak and how you're dealing with it and how many people are dying to these things. These things don't care about anything else other than eating and feeding the brood queen. This is the little ship that dropped. Nice Keith artwork there. And we had another look at the 2 Chamax. And this one is more of a holding action. You're just standing down all these creatures as they're trying to get to you and eat you. Some of these creatures have wings and can fly, immature queens, and 1 or 2 of the hunters can have wings as well. So they're still able to get onto the little area that you're protecting, but by and large, you have a nice choke point. You're able to keep them out. And then you get a second ship that comes crashing down to the planet. Another one of these, full of these things. It just crash landed. It was not under control, but enough of these creatures survived that you've got a second clutch that is working up. And there's a ton of food here. These things will continue to breed and eat until they completely strip the planet. The Second ship, however, represents an opportunity where you get to go find what stops these things. And you find in the course of it that these things were basically in cryogenics, and freezing them will stop them. So you're able to develop a nice little gadget in fine approved science fiction from the 1950s mode. The scientists come up with a gadget that ends up being basically a freeze gun, and you're able to field these things enough that you're able to freeze enough of these things to make the clutch go dormant. So you save the planet, which is kind of neat because I don't know that that would have worked, but I like the outcome of the adventure. On the two ships that have crashed, you find computer records. And the computer records on the planet known as Chamax, that's where these came from. There was a burrowing race of sentient pseudocrustaceans distantly related to the bugs, but they were the dominant race until about 400 years ago. They were at tech level 9 and had interplanetary flight, but not jump drive. They had a low birth rate, and they were plagued constantly by a burrowing carnivore that kept coming in and wiping out chunks of their cities and things like that. So they established a program to poison and destroy these carnivores. What they found out is the carnivore was preying primarily on the creatures we now know to be Chamax, the bugs. And the Chamax, once their main predator was gone, just bred without reason and were able to come in and actually destroy the society on the planet. To flee the planet, they came up with these slower than light ships, and the idea was that they would traverse the area in cryosuspension and then emerge on the new planet. To that end, they made all their computer records very accessible so everybody could understand what was going on. Unfortunately for them, some of the Chamax got aboard while the ships were buttoning up for their final flight and actually took off with some Chamax aboard. And that, of course, led to everybody on board getting killed and the Chamax going into hibernation aboard the ship and spreading themselves. So there's a bunch of these ships out there, and no one knows how many. So there's the alien spaceship itself, and that's the end of the adventure. So Horde is more of a group adventure and more of a military undertaking than just a straightforward traveler adventure. But that was a nice change of pace after having been in the Chamax Plague. Both are good. The only point of contention I have is it's a little coincidental that these ships that have been in space for 400 years happen to crash while you are in the Mud Shark and happen to be on the other planet, having already encountered the Chamax Plague on its home planet. But if that's my worst complaint about the adventure, it's a really good adventure. This one I wouldn't mind seeing Mongoose adapt. I thought this was a really good adventure and had a lot to offer. So that's it. That's my look at the Chamax Plague and Horde from Double Adventure 5 from 1981. I hope you like what you heard and saw. Also, I want to remind everybody, I am going to be at Adepticon on March 25th. I'm just going there as just a visitor, but I'll be walking around in a Doc Savage shirt. If you want to just stop and chat for a few moments, I'd be very interested. Big Battletech presence at Adepticon. Marvel Crisis Protocol, lots of Star Wars, Star Trek games, but primarily Warhammer 40K and other game design or Game Workshop games. They also even have Magic the Gathering tournaments and things like that. So there's something there for everybody. The tournaments cost you money. I'm not sure how much because I've never played in one. But admission is free to just come in, wander around, and enjoy the dealer room. Dealers usually have 50 or 60 vendors, usually very much worth your time. So that's it. That's all I got to say for today from page 121. I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.